Welcome back to the shed. Today we're going to take a look at the 1985 Hugo and Nebula award-winning novel by Orson Scott Card, Ender's Game. So what I would like to do, as always, is provide a bit of a plot overview, talk to what I liked, what I didn't like. I'll make some recommendations and I'll rank it on our ever-growing sci-fi shed ladder, and I've got a feeling that this one is not going to get any easier. So the novel tells the story of Andrew Ender Wiggins. Andrew is a 6-year-old boy, but he's seen as a final hope for humanity. And that's because humanity is at war with these alien beings we've encountered called the buggers. Now, we seem to be on the losing end of this war. There's not really much going our way, and all hopes are pinned on this school, this training school, to build these new generals in the hope that we find just a spark of genius that may turn the tide in this war and have us win. And Andrew's a third, and that's because this world is set in the two children policy, and Peter and Valentine, Ender's brother and sister, have shown a whole lot of promise in this training school, so much so that they've made an exception to this two children policy and have allowed his parents to raise Ender in hope that he will bring the balance that we saw in Peter and Valentine, his sisters, and their failings through this graduate school. So entering battle school, Ender's already on the back foot. He's already seen as a third and someone who shouldn't quite be in society. And to make matters worse, he's being alienated by the commanders of the school to bring out the best or worst potentially out of Ender. So the story really follows Ender as he struggles through battle school, eventually gets promotion into command school in what is really these big simulators that they're fighting in, trying to work out different formations, trying to figure out exactly what tactics may win against something like the buggers. And the story really is a story of friendship, a story of the underdog, and a story of what makes someone or something truly good or truly evil. So what is there to like about Orson Scott Card's Ender's Game? Look, I've asked this question on myself so many times over the years, and it's really difficult to put a finger on just what it is about Ender's Game that makes this one of the best science fiction novels of all time. But I'd have to start with the protagonist, the likable and somehow repulsive protagonist we have in Andrew Wiggins. And I like the fact that it's not black and white, right? You can't, and so often we find in our own lives that the decisions that we make are not always black and white. They're not always good and bad, but they're somewhere in the middle. And this is what I think is typical of Andrew Wiggins, right? Is this kid who's suffering through a whole lot of stuff at school. He's getting bullied. He's getting bullied at home and at school. He's getting alienated. He's set up for failure in many ways. The odds are continuously stacked up against him. That makes him the ultimate underdog that you want to root for, that you just want to see him succeed. On the other hand, the way he deals with conflict is rather odd, right? It's not what you'd call a sane individual, and all of which makes Ender just the protagonist you want to rally behind. And even when he's at fault, you can't help but sympathize with him and hope for the best for him. And I think that one of the standouts for me, one of the things that makes Ender's Game the novel that it is the internal struggle that we see in Andrew Wiggins. We see that, you know, maybe, just maybe, in a similar situation, would you react the same? Would you have the same kind of conflict? And I think that's what makes Andrew Wiggins such a lovable character and one of my all-time favorite, you know, villains and heroes in a whole of science fiction. So that would have to be my number one reason why I think Andrew Wiggins, in particular in this novel, makes Ender's Game such a wonderful piece of literature. The other point I would make that makes Ender's Game, for me, one of the all-time great science fiction novels is the story of friendship, right? It's, you know, you find friendship sometimes in most unlikely of places, and it's sometimes very difficult to make good friends, but when you do, you can, you know, make that real tight bond that will last a lifetime, like I'm pleased to say with the friends I've made in my whole life as well. So I think this is a story in many ways about friendship and building those friendships and those strong bonds that I thoroughly enjoyed as well. The other point I would make as to the reason that this is one of the best science fiction books of all time is the ethical dilemmas that this novel raises. Like, there's nothing truly black and white in this, and we're constantly challenging our morals and absolute morality, and where does morality come from? And there's really almost never a clear-cut good or bad decision in this novel, and I think it's one that pushes the boundaries of what makes something truly evil or what makes something truly good. And I like the balance in this, and I like the way the story was told through the eyes of young Andrew Wiggins. But I love the philosophical and ethical and moral arguments that this novel brings up. So I really enjoyed that aspect of the novel as well. And I've already alluded to the underdog, right? Who doesn't like the underdog story? And this is just the ultimate and pinnacle of the underdog novels that I've read to date, at least. So that's a whole lot of positive praise for a novel that is around about 320 pages. But what is there not to like in Ender's Game? Now, it wouldn't take you long to get online and do a search for Orson Scott Card to find a whole lot of negative press and a whole lot of negative reviews on Orson Scott Card. But I'm going to steer completely away from that, and that's because this is a booktube channel, right? I don't want to look at individuals and what their belief systems may be and how they influence their work, because I honestly feel that's true of any author, right? It's not too difficult, and I think it's a bit unfair to pick out one author about their beliefs and how it influences their works, because I honestly feel that that's true of any author, right? Part of you becomes the novel, and I think that's true of Ender's Game. So I'm not going to comment on any of that, but comment on the things that I didn't like about the actual novel itself. So what is there not to like about Ender's Game? And that for me has got to do with the fact that sometimes as I was reading through it, I found it really difficult to believe that these guys, the kids in Battle School, were like 6, 7, 8-year-olds, right? I just found that their actions and their thought processes just, I don't know, I just found it really difficult to swallow that pill. I would rather have seen these kids being, maybe 14, 15, that I could sort of understand. But I thought the fact that, Ender was like 5, 6 years old when he entered Battle School was just a bit of a stretch for me and something that I couldn't really believe. Look, it's a minor nitpick, but that was one of the things that was a bit of a stumbling block for me. I found it really difficult to get over. The other thing I didn't really enjoy, but I did understand why it needed to be in the novel, was the alter egos of Peter and Valentine in Demosthenes and Loki. And they used some pretty interesting technological foresight in these bulletin boards / internet type technology in 1985 when the novel was written. So I thought that was pretty interesting foresight. Had these kids who were like 10 to 12 years old, I think, or maybe just slightly older, we're using bulletin board type systems to influence public opinion, so much so that they became rulers of the world, right? And I don't know, that was another one that was really difficult for me to swallow. How these kids, by using something like the internet, could be so influential to the point that they become world rulers and no one really questioned. I mean, like, these are kids, right? And they were supposed to be geniuses, right? That's what made Ender such imposing force, right? Is that they were all geniuses, these kids. But I just found that, no matter how much of a genius you are, I just couldn't swallow the fact that you still are kids. So, wisdom comes with age. You might be brilliantly book smart, but you're not going to be wise. And you may want to argue that in the comments, but that's my opinion. And I just found it really difficult to think that these kids would be so wise and so brilliant and such a genius that they would sway public opinion so much that they would become world leaders, right? So yeah, look, again, I found that rather bizarre and rather unbelievable. And honestly, I didn't think it really added to the plot as well. But look, that were the two things I would consider sort of, not quite my cup of tea in this novel. But overall, Ender's Game, and I've read the complete series, like, Speaker for the Dead, Genocide, and the books that followed. Wonderful series of novels, one that you ought to read, and I really hope that my two little criticisms there, which are really two small criticisms, will not dissuade you from reading what is one of the best science fiction books of all time. So who would I recommend this wonderful novel to? So when it comes to recommendations, if you enjoy military science fictions, then I think you ought to read Ender's Game, because some would consider this the pinnacle of military science fiction novels. But books that we've covered in a date, the likes of Joel Alderman's Forever War, if you've enjoyed this novel, classic military science fiction novel that questions the benefits of war and what war is good for, I'd say have a go at that. If you've enjoyed Forever War, I think you will enjoy Ender's Game. Probably more to the point would be Forever Peace, though, from Joe Alderman, because some of the tech in this novel sort of reminds me of what we see in Ender's Game. So if you've enjoyed Forever Peace by Joe Alderman, I say have a go at Ender's Game. The other novel that I've got to mention, if we're talking military science fiction, is Starship Troopers, that we've already covered on the Sci-Fi Shed Letter. Now, this takes more of a biased look towards, as did Forever War, but this is more sort of pro-militarization in Starship Troopers. So if you've enjoyed that, I think there are elements in the Ender's Game that you will enjoy. And one novel that we haven't covered today, which I love dearly, would be Joe Alderman, I was going to say, John Scalzi's The Old Man's War, another classic military science fiction novel that I think if you've enjoyed this, you will also enjoy Ender's Game. We've got to make a tough decision and rank this on our ever-growing Sci-Fi Share Ladder. So let me flip the cameras around and see exactly where this one lands on the ladder. So back to the Share Ladder and ranking tonight's 1985 Hugo and Nebula Award-winning novel by Orson Scott Card, Ender's Game. I've got my full criteria down below as to how I weigh and rank these great novels. And it's not going to be an easy one, but I think it's needless to say it's going to be somewhere on the A side of the board. And is it going to challenge the top contenders? And I think justifiably so. This honestly could be anywhere in the top 5. But I've applied my full criteria, and we're going to start with Hyperion. Is Ender's Game going to top Hyperion as the best science fiction and fantasy novel to have won a Hugo or a Nebula when I apply my criteria to it? And many would say that this should be the #1 novel. But when I look at my criteria, I'd have to say that Hyperion's got a couple of things that just go in its favor. And for me, it's more around the concept, right? Hyperion covers a lot of great science fiction concepts, from time dilation, time travel, to AI threats. And I mean, there's just horror themes in that novel. I love Hyperion. So when I look at the concept and how it was executed, I've got to say that Ender's Game, the concept, although I enjoyed it, didn't quite have the impact that Hyperion had for my personal reading experience and pleasure. So I'm going to have to say it just lost a couple of marks, did Ender's Game, when it comes to the concepts, as brilliant and as unforgettable as that concept is. Which sort of talks to the memory test, right? I sort of forgot to mention the memory test, which is probably a simple one-line sentence. Ender's Game is an unforgettable novel. Let me just say that. Ender's Game is an unforgettable novel. Complete full marks. That's all I can say about the memory test. So everything was on par with Hyperion when it comes to the weighted inputs, but it got the slight edge because of those concepts. Dune and Gateway and Canticle for Leibowitz. Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. It's all I can say. It's a difficult one. Oh man. I'm gonna have a stab at it, and I'm gonna say I'm not even convinced, and we may yet need to revisit this board. But I'm gonna say, with most of these novels being still fresh in my head, that I'm gonna put Ender's Game just below A Canticle for Leibowitz. And the reason is this. When you look at Gateway, again, I thought the concept just got a couple of points due to the concept, and that unforgettable, hateable anti-hero protagonist that we find in Frederick Pohl's Gateway that I really thoroughly enjoyed. I think for me, June's world building and writing again was just exquisite, right? I just love the world building in June, and he got a couple of marks more than what we see in the world building of Ender's Game, because a lot of what happens in Ender's Game is at that battle school and command school. We don't really see a whole lot of the buggers, and we really don't see a whole lot of the world and the setting. It becomes clearer in some of the sequels, but we don't really get a whole lot of world building and exposure to what makes the aliens so alien, right? There's just not a whole lot of talk there about the aliens, and hence why June and Gateway got the slight edge. And A Canticle for Leibowitz goes the other way. The reason I gave the slight edge to Canticle for Leibowitz is the writing. I thought Walter M. Miller Jr.'s writing, it's just wonderful, right? It's in a league on its own, and I just could not give points to Ender's Game for the writing, and it took a couple of points off for Ender's Game, and we end up where it is, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th. The 5th on the list, right? Top 5. I love it. I love Ender's Game, and I love all these top 5 novels. There's really nothing between these novels, right? And if I was to reread them, and maybe in a different order, I find myself probably rearranging those top 5. But that's where we are. It's a top 5 novel. Many would consider this the best science fiction novel of all time. And honestly, I would not argue with you. I would say, yeah, I agree with you. It is definitely one of the best science fiction novels of all time. But I've done a little bit more thinking, and I reckon that's where it sits on the shed ladder tonight. Hey, what are your thoughts? Have you read Ender's Game? Have you read the sequels? It's one of my all-time favorite novels. I love it. I really do love Ender's Game. It's probably not quite reflected on what is, a wonderful set of novels like I've mentioned in the past. These are all brilliant novels, and Ender's has got to be one of my top 5 favorite novels of all time, and it's justified. For me, it's placed on the ladder where it is tonight. I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions. I know this is a love novel, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Or maybe you're the opposite. Maybe you don't care for this novel at all, and I would love to hear the reasons why. I sort of hinted as to some of the reasons why I know personally why some people don't like this book. But I like to read a book for what it is, a book, and take personal opinions out of it. I'd love to hear from you, and I hope to see you next time. I'm reading another classic at the moment, which hopefully will make it in the next couple of weeks. Until then, I hope you hit that like and subscribe and notification bell so you don't miss out. I'll see you next time in the shed.